Questions on the homework assignments? So what we're looking at today is completing the square. Completing the square is the first method that we're going to get that works for every quadratic equation, any and all quadratic equations that we can have. And there's really four main steps. And the first step is a equal to 1. If not, make it so. Is a equal to 1? If not, make it so. Make it be 1. 2. Get the variables on one side, and constant terms on the other. And leave 2 spaces. Step 3. So get the variables on one side, constant terms on the other. Yeah. So we want the variables are x squared term x, the variable being squared, and the variable to the first power on one side, and their coefficients, and then the numbers on the other. Yep. Numbers with or terms with variables on one side, terms without variables on the other. Because once we finish doing that, we're going to find c, which is equal to b over 2 squared. And we want to plug it in, or plug it back in on both sides. Or really, we can say we're adding it to both sides. Because that's what the space is for. Because once we find the value of c, we're going to add it to both sides. We're going to plug it into both sides. And step number 4, factor and solve. Factor and solve. Now we're going to apply these steps to this problem here. We're going to end up skipping the second one, but we're going to apply these steps to this problem here. Now we've already solved this problem. We did it yesterday. We know the solutions. But I want us to work through this here in one that we've done before. And two, even though that x squared minus 16x plus 64 is a perfect square trinomial, we can still use these steps. We can still do this process and get the correct answer. Now, the first thing we really need, and it's not so much in the steps, but our variables do need to be on the same side. X squareds, I can't have x squared on either side. I can't have x on both sides of the equation. We do need all of our variables on the same side. Now, at this point here, if we want to, we can also move the 100. We could subtract 100 from both sides. Telling us that we have x squared minus 16x minus 36 is equal to 0. The constant term, the term without a variable, if they're on either side, that's fine. If they're on the same side, that works out even better. Either one works. But the main thing is that the x squared term, our x terms, our variable being squared, variable to the first power, are on the same side. So that we can answer the first question, our first step, is a equal to 1? Is the number in front of x squared 1? And if we look at this here, is the number in front of x squared 1? Yes. So we move on to step 2, because if it's not, we have to make it be 1. Here, a is 1. So that means we can move on to step number 2, which is to get the variables on one side and the constant term on the other. And leave 2 spaces. So we really just add 36 to both sides. And this is kind of why I said at the beginning, or a minute ago, that really having the constant term on the same side or having them opposite sides really doesn't make a big difference. Because if we'd have just subtracted 64 from both sides from the start, we would have got x squared minus 16x equals 36. We would have gotten to the same spot. Variables on the same side is more important. Now, once we get the constant term on one side, variables on the other, we're going to find the value of c. And the formula to find c, this value of c that will make x squared minus 16x plus whatever this number is, be a perfect square trinomial so that we can factor it to a single set of parentheses. Now, the main term we need to find c, the main number, is the value of b. And the value of b in our case is what? Negative 16, because it's the number in front of x. So we can replace b with negative 16 in our formula, giving us negative 16 divided by 2 squared. Well, negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. And negative 8 squared, negative 8 times negative 8 is 64, yes? So, now that we have the value of c, we're going to plug it into both spaces. Telling us that our perfect square trinomial is x squared minus 16x plus 64. Okay, so all that's verified is the fact that what we started with was a perfect square trinomial. Now, the nice thing, unlike the last time we did this and actually factored it out, doing these steps will tell us what this will factor to. Because x squared minus 16x plus 64 is a perfect square trinomial, so we can factor it to a single set of parentheses being squared. So I have a single set of parentheses and x in there, and the number and sign that goes inside the parentheses with x is the number and sign that we had before we squared it to find c. So since that's negative 8, x squared minus 16x plus 64 is going to factor to x minus 8 squared. On the right-hand side, we have 36 plus 64, which is, well, 100. We're back where we started, really. Questions on this here so far? So we're really all the way down into step 4. We're halfway done with it. We just need to solve. We're going to take the square root of both sides. And on the left-hand side, the square root and square will cancel, leaving us with x minus 8. Now, whenever we take the square root of both sides, we have to put the plus or minus. Because whenever we take the square root of both sides, we have to have the plus or minus. Because what comes out, or what's inside the square, being multiplied by itself, could be positive or negative. And the square root of 100 is 10. Now at this point here, we do need to get x by itself, so what we're going to do is add 8 to both sides, because negative 8 plus 8 is 0, giving us x equals 8 plus or minus 10. Now we could say that we're done as long as 8 and 10 are not like terms. We can't add and subtract 8 and 10. Well, 8 and 10 are like terms because we can do 8 plus 10. 8 plus 10 is 18. We can also do 8 minus 10. 8 minus 10 is negative 2. So since we can add and we can subtract these two, we need to simplify it down as far as we can, telling us that our final answer is 18 and negative 2. And we did find these yesterday, but this is showing us that these steps work, and it works this way every single time. Questions on this here? We're ready for the next one. So we're going to skip that one because that's just like the last one we just did, or the one we just did. It's already perfect square trinomial. Let's start looking at some that aren't perfect square trinomials from the start. So we look at number 7, x squared minus 4x plus 8. Equation is equal to 0. Everything is on the same side, so we're good there. Step number 1. Is a equal to 1? Is the number in front of x squared 1? Well, yes. So we're good there. We're good with step 1, which means we can move on to step 2. Get the variables on one side and the constant terms on the other. And for the most part, all that means for this here is us to move the constant term, the number without a variable, to the other side by adding or subtracting. And we're going to leave two spaces. X squared minus 4x plus blank is equal to negative 8 plus blank. Questions on this here? What's the value of b? So what's the value of b? Well, the value of b is the number in front of x, so it is negative 4. So we'd plug negative 4 in for b, so we'd get negative 4 over 2 squared. And the reason it's negative 4 is it's lining up with the general form of a quadratic, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. B is going to be the number in front of x. Does that make sense where you found b? Yes, no? Okay, I'm just making sure because that's going to be helpful. We got to know where that's coming from. Now the value b will not have x. It's not going to be negative 4x because it's bx. So b is negative 4. X is its own term. Does that make sense? Okay. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared, negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. It's not always going to work out that the number we find for C is just the opposite sign of B. It just works out with this here. 4's factors are 2 and 2. 2 squared gets us back to 4. Kind of undid itself. 4 is really the only one that's just going to do this with here. Okay? C will always be positive. Because when we multiply a number by itself, we get a positive number. That's why I is a thing. We can't find a number multiplied by itself that's a negative. So C is positive 4. Now on the left-hand side, we're going to factor this. So we'll have our set of parentheses and x. Now the number that goes inside the parentheses with x is the number inside the parentheses before we squared it to find C. And that is negative 2. So it's telling us that x squared minus 4x plus 4 is x minus 2 squared. Now on the right-hand side, we do need to simplify. Negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. If we needed to, negative 8 plus 4, we can do that in the calculator. We'll do it just fine. And lastly, we need to solve. And really, we're just solving by the square root method. We're going to take the square root of both sides. Now, on the left-hand side, the square root and square will cancel, leaving us with x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus. Now we need to simplify the square root of negative 4. Now the negative in the square root of negative 4 is going to do what? It's going to come out as I. Now this is kind of off to the side, but the last thing we need to simplify with this is the square root of 4. And the square root of 4 is telling us that the square root of negative 4 is 2I. We kind of do it in this part just in case the square root does not reduce nicely. Square root of 4 reduces nicely, we're good there, we're fine. But if it was, say, the square root of 5, it doesn't reduce the 30xs, the yellow calculator will just tell us it's the square root of 5. So it's I squared to 5. We have our answer. Now we could say we're done as long as x is by itself. But unfortunately we have x minus 2. So we have to add 2 to both sides. Because on our x minus 2, if we add 2, the 2's will simplify out, leaving us with x. On the right-hand side, we're adding 2 to this plus or minus 2i. So we're going to put the 2 in front for now. Saying that we have 2 plus or minus 2i. 2 and 2i are not like terms because one of them has I and the other doesn't. Now if they both had 2i, if they both had I, it was 2i plus 2i, is 4i. 2i minus 2i is 0. But because they don't both have an I term, they're not like terms. So this here is our final answer. Questions on this here? Questions on anything we've done so far? Let's look at the next one, x squared plus 8x minus 5. So x squared and x are already on the same side. We got all those terms on the same side. Is a equal to 1? Is the number in front of x squared 1? Yes. So we don't have to do anything with step 1. We can just move on to step 2 by getting the variables on one side and our constant terms on the other. c is equal to b over 2 squared. Because really, once we added 5 to both sides, we got step 2 done, giving us x squared plus 8x plus blank, because that's our spot for c, equals 5 plus blank, our other spot for c. Because unfortunately, we can't add a number to one side, we have to add it to both. Now the question is, what's the value of b? It would be 8. Specifically, it would be positive 8. So for our c equals b over 2 squared, we'll replace b with 8. And now we can go about simplifying this here. 8 divided by 2 is what? 4. 4 squared is 16. Now we do need to factor here x squared plus 8x plus 16. We need to factor it to a single set of parentheses being squared. So we'll have our parentheses, we'll have x. And the number that goes inside the parentheses with x is the same number that's inside the parentheses before we squared it to find c. And that is positive 4. So we get x plus 4 squared equals, well, 5 plus 16 is 21. Questions on how we got to this point here? At this point here, we need to solve. And the first step in solving is to square root both sides. And on the left-hand side, the square root and square will cancel, telling us that x plus 4 is equal to plus or minus. Now we need to simplify the square root of 21. Well, if we're not sure what the square root of 21 is, I would grab that yellow calculator and just throw it in, let it do it. I believe it tells you it's the square root of 21, yes? So all it's saying is that there are no perfect square factors of 21, because the only factors of 21 are 1 and 21, 3 and 7. All of those are prime numbers, except for 21. 1, 3, and 7 are prime. So there are no perfect squares that will simplify out. Last but not least, we need to get x by itself, so we're going to subtract 4. Telling us that x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 21. And that's it.
I have your attention, please. I need all our students to go to Mrs. Keller's room. I need Sabra, Naomi, Hannah Wiggins, Valeska, Bray, Gavin, Jaden, Nayland, Rylan, Gio, and Justin. Thank you.
Now, especially when we get to the end, if one of the two terms has a square root or I left over, or both, especially after that plus or minus, they're not combining. They're not going to be combining, they're not simplifying. Because the square root of 21 and negative 4 are not like terms. We can't add, we can't subtract. So that's as far as we can take it. Questions on this here? You ready for the next one? 3x squared plus 12x plus 15 equals 0. We want to solve it by completing the square. Is the value of a equal to 1? What is the value of a? Okay. Step number 1, is the value of a equal to 1? If not, make it so. If not, make it be 1. Well, we said the number in front of x squared is 3. So to make it become 1, we have to divide this by 3. But we can't just divide one term by 3. We've got to divide the entire thing. Every single term by 3. Well, 3x squared divided by 3 is just x squared. 12x divided by 3 is 4x. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So we get x squared plus 4x plus 5. Questions on this so far? So really, did have a being different than 1 make a big difference? Well, not really. We just divided by 3, and the steps are going to follow. Because now that a is equal to 1, we want to get the constant terms on one side and the variables on the other. Now at this point, we need to find the value of b. And the value of b is, it's just 4. Positive or negative? Positive. Now again, we could go parentheses 4 divided by 2, close parentheses squared, enter, let the calculator do it. But it is nice to know what our division of 2 is, because it does tell us what goes inside the parentheses before we square it. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. And again, this is one of the interesting tidbit with 4 and 2 than the numbers themselves. Now at this point here, we can add this number to both sides. Now, good question, even though you probably didn't ask. We don't have to always add it to both sides. There is another way we can do it, because adding it to both sides works. The other option is if we don't add it to both sides, I'll erase these here, you don't have to erase this, is that I add it and subtract it from the same side. Because if I add 4 to the left-hand side and I subtract 4 from that same side, what do we have? 4 minus 4, which is, so what did I really add to it? 0. I didn't add anything, but it does help us because it makes this left-hand side have the x squared plus 4x plus 4. But that doesn't do a whole lot for us, because that minus 4, we're going to want to move it to the other side anyway, so we might as well put it over there. There are some cases in certain circumstances where adding and subtracting is required on the same side. We won't come across it in this class. Pre-calculus, we'll come across it. It's not that big of a jump when we hit it. X squared plus 4x plus 4. Well, inside the parentheses, we will have x. And the number that goes inside the parentheses with x is going to be positive 2. Negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. At this point here, we'll take the square root of both sides. Well, on the left-hand side, our square root and the square will cancel, telling us that we have x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus. Now, we need to figure out what the square root of negative 1 is. What is the square root of negative 1? Yes, by definition, the square root of negative 1 is I. We could do it the same way we've done all the negatives up to this point. The negative would come out as I, leaving with us with the square root of 1. Square root of 1 is 1, so 1i, or just I. Last step, we need to get x by itself, so we're going to subtract 2 from both sides, telling us x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus I. Negative 2 and I are not like terms. They can't be combined. They can't be simplified. So that's as far as we can take it. Questions on this here? We feel pretty comfortable with this here so far? Because I will go out on a limb and say it felt like, especially going into this, when A was different than 1, that it would make it a bigger issue, bigger problem than it actually did. And yes, there are some cases, we'll see it after this one, that the numbers don't look as nice, aren't as quote-unquote pretty, but the process doesn't change. And the 30XS, the yellow calculator, helps a lot of the bumps and the ugliness, quote-unquote, of the numbers out. And we'll see it. But as we look at this here, negative 3x squared minus 18x minus 6 equals 0. The main two that we focus on being on the same side as the x squared and x term. If they're on the same side, we're good there. Is A1. No, so we need to divide everything by something. What do we want to divide everything by? I would do negative 3, but yes, 3. And the reason I'm doing negative 3 is because negative 3x squared divided by negative 3 is going to be x squared. Negative 18 divided by negative 3 is going to be positive 6x. And negative 6 divided by negative 3 is plus 2 is equal to 0. Questions on this so far? Now, with us solving, we're wanting to find the value of x, what we can plug into x to make the function equal 0, yes? And when we graphed it, we were trying to see where it crossed the x-axis. Would it be reasonable to say that negative 3x squared minus 18x minus 6 is a completely different function from x squared plus 6x plus 2? Well, yeah, all the numbers are completely different. These here are the two graphs. The one in blue is the negative 3x squared minus 18x minus 6. The one in red is our x squared plus 6x plus 2. And as we can visually see, every point between the two is almost completely different. There's 2 points that it's not. And those 2 points are where it crosses the x-axis, yes? And the only 2 points we care about, we're trying to solve for, are the values of x that make the function be 0. Those 2 points where it crosses the x-axis. So yes, every other point besides those two is different, but the only 2 points we care about, trying to find, those values are the exact same. Now at this point here, we need to get the constant term by itself. And our value b in this case is 6. So we have 6 over 2, which is 3. And 3 squared is 9. X squared plus 6x plus 9 will factor 2. X plus 3 squared. Negative 2 plus 9 is 7. Square root both sides. Here the square root and square will cancel, telling us that x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 7. Last but not least, we need to get x by itself, so we're going to subtract 3 from both sides, telling us x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 7. Questions on this here? Questions on anything we've done so far? So is completing the square as challenging as you thought this would be? Is this, it's not bad. It's steps. There's a lot of steps, but each of the steps is manageable, is doable. Would we agree there? So we have time for one more. I'm not going to look at this one. I want you to mark that one out. I want to look at this one. Because I want to look at one of the uglier, quote unquote, because it's really not. It's just the numbers may not look as nice. Because if we look at this here, the value in front of x squared, the value of a is not 1. It's not 1. So we have to make it be 1. And we can do that by dividing all three terms by 2. 2x squared divided by 2 is going to be x squared. That's fine. Negative 5 divided by 2. Does it simplify nicely? No. So we're going to simplify it as far as we possibly can. And then we're going to leave it as a fraction. Well, 5 and 67 do not divide by 2 nicely. So we're going to leave it as fractions because, again, at a certain point to find c, we're going to have to square it. Squaring decimals is not great. And at the end, we're going to have to take the square root. Easier to square root fractions than it is to square root decimals. Steps don't change. Because our next step, once we get a to be 1, we're going to move the constant term to the other side. And leave 2 spaces. So that's still the same step. We still have to find the value of c, and c is equal to b over 2 squared. Now b is negative 5/2. So that's telling us, when we plug it in, that we have negative 5/2 over 2 squared. Now if it didn't divide by 2 already, it's not going to divide by 2 now. But the calculator does not care. Because it'll take negative 5/2 over 2 and say it is negative 5/4. Now we do need to square it. Now there's 2 ways that we can do it. One, I can hit square, enter. A and S is just the previous answer. Our previous answer was our negative 5/4. It took it, it squared it, it tells us it's 25/4. Value of c should always be positive. The other way we can do it is parentheses, negative 5 over 4, close parentheses squared, which is 25/16. I probably said that wrong just a second ago, but it should be 25/16. So we plug 25/16 back into both sides. And we can move on to factoring. Again, for factoring, it's going to be the same as it's been. The number and sign that goes inside the parentheses with x. Number and sign we had inside the parentheses before we squared it. So this here, x squared minus 5/2 x plus 25/16 factors to x minus 5/4 squared. Now the other side, negative 67/2 plus 25/16. Yes. I'm just telling the calculator, hey, do this for me. Now we can start solving. We're going to square root both sides. The left-hand side, the square root and square will cancel, telling us we have x minus 5/4. Now I'm going to write this out because when we simplify this square root, we're going to break it apart. We're going to break it into 2 parts. We're going to have the square root of the top, square root of the bottom. And the calculator that's done the best work with radicals, these square roots, is the 30xs, yes? Now will this 30xs take the square root of a negative? Well, no. So we take that negative, and as we've been doing, it's going to come out as I. So really what we have left is the square root of 511 on top over the square root of 16. It was negative? Yeah, okay. So it tells us just the square root of 511 over 4. Yeah, because the negative we already pulled out as I. So that the 30xs can do it, it can simplify it as far as it possibly can. Last thing we got to do is get x by its self. And that's it. We will finish this tomorrow.